technology, I can't do it. I started with a little lapel mic, which is on that little black thing at the front, which is actually my phone tripod. I just stuck the mic on there. I stuck it into my laptop, or I used my earphones, and I used Audacity, which is a free software that you can record and edit your podcast on. And that is how I started. And not much has changed since then, to be honest with you. So if I move on, oh, did I not? I lost one. We'll see. We'll see if it comes up. We'll see if it comes up. I might have deleted it. That would be terrible, wouldn't it? If it doesn't come up, I'll come back to it. So I wanted to go over some stats with you to begin with, just to show you the advantages of having a podcast. On social media, you have less than a minute of people's time when they're scrolling. On blog posts, you've got 5 to 10 minutes. On YouTube, 3 to 5 minutes. And if you haven't hooked them in by that point, they go away. Podcasts at the moment, you've got 20 plus minutes to get their attention. I see this as because usually people are listening when they're doing other things. So they're distracted by what they're doing. They're not going to click off. Whereas with all the other things, they have to be more present with it. So me, I listen to my podcast in the car. So if I've got a 20-minute journey, you've got me for 20 minutes because I can't fiddle with my phone and change to music or anything else. So, you know, podcast is great for that one fact there. The other interesting statistics are that there are 850,000 podcasts at the moment. And you may think that's a lot, but there is 31 million YouTube channels. So if you're starting a YouTube channel, you've got 31 million channels to contend with. So actually, we are at the beginning of podcasting. There are 63.8 million downloads a month, which means that there are a lot of people wanting to listen to it. And if you look at that stat for UK, 6.5% of the podcasts are in the UK, which means we have got so much growth yet to come. So if you jump on the bandwagon now, you could be one of the, you know, all the top YouTubers and think that could be you in your niche. You know, Catherine, start your health and wellness podcast and you could be one of the top health and wellness podcasts in the UK, because we are such a tiny percentage of the overall podcasts at the moment. So what you need to start, you need your microphone. You need a device, which can be a laptop, can be an iPad, can be your computer. Software, like I said, I use Audacity. I found it really useful. There are other ones out there, but that's the one that I use and it's free. And then you need a podcast host. I use Buzzsprout. Libsyn is another good one that I've heard of. Buzzsprout was recommended by Pat Flynn. And if you don't know who Pat Flynn is, write his name down, Flynn. He is the podcast king. He is the fountain of all knowledge when it comes to podcasting. So definitely check him out. And then you need ideas for episodes, and they're in your head. So they're free too. So you can start your podcast absolutely for free. That's what I did. Then you can, the things that I would suggest you upgrade is your microphone when you can. Most of you know that I bought my fancy microphone when I got to a certain number of downloads. It was my present to myself. So it's currently, yesterday, it was 60 quid on Amazon, but it's a really good quality and it's one that is recommended. Pat Flynn recommended it and a couple of other podcasters have recommended it as being a really good quality mic for under £100. It does fluctuate on Amazon, so put it in your wish list because you might go on today and it might say it's 70 quid, but you know, it fluctuates. So get it when it's cheaper. Podcast hosting. So as I said, I use Buzzsprout and it's actually free for the first 90 days. So it will store your podcast for 90 days. And then the first one you did will drop off and it will continue like that unless you pay for it. So depending on the type of podcast you're doing, depending on what your motivations are, you might be happy for that to happen and you can just keep with the free. If not, I did the $12 a month upgrade. And so that's what I pay for. to host my podcast, and that's all my podcast has cost me. It costs me £12 a month. The advantage of that, and I think I probably mentioned this later on, but I'll say it now, is that with YouTube, one of the disadvantages right now of YouTube is that they are putting adverts on everything, and your adverts might not even be relevant to what you do. I watched for those of you who don't know, I'm also an independent Sensi consultant. I watch a lot of the US Sensi consultants do their videos, and on one of their videos was an advert for a program that talks about the inner workings of the mind of Jimmy Savile. And I was just like, I wouldn't want that on my video. I wouldn't want that anywhere near my video. Why is that? And she's in America. Why is that coming up? Obviously, because I'm English. And it happens to be part of a show that I generally watch for other reasons. But yeah, that came up and I was just like, oh, that makes me uncomfortable. But with a podcast, you don't get adverts unless you choose to put adverts on. If you want to monetize your podcast, you can get people to advertise, you can do sponsorships, you can do sort of a subscription-based service where people get extra podcasts if they subscribe and things like that. So there's a way to monetize your podcast, but it's on your terms, unlike with YouTube. The other thing that I would suggest upgrading to at some point is one of these nice acoustic isolation shields. And that's because a lot of people tend to not have a music studio in their house, and this just helps to deaden the sound. So if you are in a room that isn't full of soft furnishings, or you're not in your wardrobe, you might find that the sound's a bit echoey, and this just helps dull down the sound. So that would be an upgrade at some point, not necessary to start. So how long should your podcast be? I started, my first podcast I think was 7 minutes long. They don't have to be really long. When you are doing solo shows, they tend to be shorter. Interviews tend to go longer. Try to aim for 15 to 20 minutes, but you will build up to that. My last one I think was about 15 minutes. It was a solo show because you just get more comfortable, you get more in depth with what you're saying, and you can pick things up. So don't worry if you start off and you record one, you go, oh my God, that's only 5 minutes, I can't put that out. You can just get it going. Quality over quantity. So don't just talk for the sake of talking. And with interviews, try and keep it under 60 minutes is my suggestion. With uploading, I upload weekly. I suggest you upload weekly. Most podcasts are uploaded weekly, but keep it consistent. So whatever it is that you do, when I talk about the what you've got to do within your podcast to actually get it up, you might think, oh, that's a lot of work. I can't do that on a weekly basis. So whatever you do, just keep it consistent because people expect it. I've been going 35 weeks now. And if somebody who subscribes to my channel doesn't get my podcast doesn't get a notification on Friday morning that a new episode has dropped, they're going to be going, where's she gone? So, you don't want people wondering that. I have announced on the podcast I'm having 2 weeks off over Christmas because my upload days are Fridays. So that's Christmas Day and New Year's Day. And I don't think anybody's listening to podcasts on those days. So I'm going to take a 2-week break, but I've let them know that that's going to happen. How not to launch. This is how I launched my podcast. I had no promotion, no runway, no episodes in the bag. I don't suggest you do it that way. Those were my mistakes. I just wanted to get it off the ground and going. I didn't do enough research to start with about how you should launch. So I would say the thing is with me is I'm part of a podcasting group, and in that group, somebody posted up, oh, I'm 22 episodes in, I've only got 2,000 downloads. They say you should wait till 50 downloads to monetize your site, but I've done it and I'm now earning £500 a month from regular reoccurring income from my podcast. So just do it, guys. And I was just like, are you kidding me? I'm more episodes in, I haven't got as many downloads, and I am not making that much money from my podcast. And it wasn't a comparison, that in that instance I was comparing myself, but then I thought about it and I thought, okay, where did I start and where am I now? How can I improve where I am? And I asked the question, I've seen this and it sparked me to think I need to increase my listenership. Any ideas? And everybody just started saying, don't compare yourself, don't compare yourself. I was like, that's not the question. I want to increase my listenership from where I was. And I started at 0. So actually where I am now is, you know, good in respect to that. I had no audience. Remember, I had my page for 5 years, but I didn't do anything with it. So I had about 50 people on it when I started, and they weren't engaged because I hadn't posted anything in 5 years. So I started from absolute 0. So where I am now is actually in a good place, really. So what I say for your launch is to follow this statement here. Tell them what you're going to tell them, tell them what you told them. And it has been attributed to Aristotle and Dale Carnegie, but it was actually an unnamed veteran preacher, according to Quote Investigator. And so that's what I suggest you do. So in the month running up to when you're going to launch your podcast, let them know, get them excited, get your audience. I know quite a few of you on this call have been in business a long time and you've got an audience. So tell them that it's coming. Tell them what you're going to talk about. Tell them how the format's going to work. Tell them if you're going to get guests on. Ask them for suggestions. What would you like to hear about? And get them involved and get them excited. And then when it launches, tell them, I suggest launching with 3 episodes. So you do your introduction episode where you're going to do exactly what you've done for the month. Tell them what the podcast is about. Tell them who you are. Tell them what the podcast format's going to be, when it's going to upload, how often it's going to upload, and all of that jazz. So that would probably be a 5-minute episode. Then do your first proper episode where you're going to talk about whatever it is that you're going to talk about, and do your second one and upload them all on the same day. This will get you going. This will get people listening. They will listen to the first one and go, oh, and the first episode's up, and they will listen. And if they listen to all 3 episodes, one, that gets your listenership up, it gets your timings up, it puts you in a good place in the algorithm to get you started, but it also hooks them into you, your voice, what you've got to say, and it will encourage them to come back. And don't forget to tell them to hit the subscribe button where they listen so that they get the notifications. And then afterwards, you want to tell them what you've told them. So get back on your social medias, give them the links, tell them what you were speaking about, tell them that your podcast is live, and keep talking about it. That's what I didn't do. So yeah, learn from my mistake there. Okay. So once you have launched, keep it consistent. So whatever you're going to do, whether you're going to do it weekly or fortnightly, just whatever you do, make sure that you commit to doing that on a regular basis, and link like your life depends on it, I've said here. So some of you have been on my podcast and I linked to you when I did it. I sent you the link so that you could share it. Link like your life depends on it. You mention anybody, link to them. I haven't had Marie Louise on my podcast, but I linked to her in one of my podcasts because I was talking about Canva and I know she's an expert. So I linked to her and then I sent her an email and I just said, hey, Marie, I did a podcast this week, I mentioned you. You know, it gets your name out there, it gets your podcast out there. So make sure that you're linking and sharing those links with people. Load it to your website. That's the sort of home of my podcast, if you like. I keep it on my website and that's where I send people because it gets traffic to my website. So that's all good for SEO and getting people on your website. Look for opportunities. So look for opportunities to guest on other people's podcasts. Look for opportunities to have people guest on yours. Batch. And this is what I was talking about earlier with how long it takes me to do my podcast. It is not a quick thing. So I highly, highly recommend batching your podcast. And if you can, hire in help. If you can get somebody to edit it for you, if you can get a VA to do a bullet point show notes of your podcast and put it up on your website so you don't have to do that. There are things that you know, maybe your voice on the podcast, but everything else you can actually ship out to other people if you can, or when you can, because that'll be one of the things that I ship out. When it comes to guests, I actually had a chat with one of the mums, not on this call today, about an issue that she's had with interviews with people, and it sort of prompted me to put this slide in. They are great for extending your reach, especially if you can collaborate with somebody in your area. So quite a few of my podcast guests at the moment aren't necessarily in my area, like Catherine. She's not like covered by loads of wedding vendors, but she may have a few in her audience, but we're not really aligned. Whereas if Catherine was going to do a podcast and she had Victoria on, those audiences, they match. So you could like double your audience by Victoria sharing, I was on Catherine's podcast, so look for people who align with what you do and have them guest on your show, because if they aren't doing exactly what you're doing, then they're going to be more than happy to share that they've been on a podcast, because that's good for them and it's going to extend your reach. Great for extending the length of your episode, and you do want to get like the more minutes you can rack up, the better in the algorithm, the better you're going to look. So if you can do some guest posts, especially in the early days when perhaps your solo shows are a bit shorter, it's going to help you get better reach there. And it's great for mixing things up, because I don't know about you, but I get sick of my own voice sometimes. So I don't want my guests, my audience getting sick of just hearing from me on a one-to-one basis. So guest starts are great for editing purposes. So there's a lot of ums, and I'm hearing myself now because I'm going to talk about it. And I think I said to Catherine before now, oh my gosh, the amount of ums people say when they're doing something like this, you just don't realize it until you're editing and you're really listening to it. So it's not something other people notice necessarily, but sometimes people do trip over what they're saying and they get a bit flustered, and so the ums and ers come out quite a lot, and there's a bit that needs cutting out there. So when you're editing guest podcasts, it takes a bit longer. Make sure you have a podcast agreement. This is what prompted, the conversation I had yesterday. Make sure you have an agreement in place. I get all of my guests to sign an agreement that says that I can use their voice for the purpose of the podcast, and also for voice clips that I will take out to use on social media. I tell them that it will be edited, but the editing will not change the meaning of what they're saying, because I don't want them to be worried that I'm going to make it sound like they've said something they haven't. And you shouldn't be doing that anyway. So get a podcast agreement signed so that you've got permission to use their voice for that purpose. If you are going to share your podcast with this person, and there are big podcasters out there that actually do this to great effect, get them to sign a release form to say that they agree to use it for the purposes that is stated, and they're not going to change things. So for instance, that you want them to say, link back to you wherever they use it, so that you're going to get some people coming to you to listen to what else you've got to say, and they know where to find you. That they're not going to edit it again. It's the edited version, and maybe you want them to use the whole thing. You don't want them to cut clips out of it, so it's on your terms, it's your podcast. But they might want to share it on their podcast if they've got a podcast, and then that's going to lead people back to you. So it's great for that. But make sure that you've got that sorted, because it can come back to bite you in the bum. And Debbie spoke earlier this year about something similar that came back to bite somebody in the bum if you don't have an agreement in place about what is expected of you. Then set your guests up for success. This is something that I didn't do, and it's something that I'm just like, brain fart. Make sure they know the type of place they should be recording their podcast. So if you're having a guest on and they are sitting in their kitchen, that's like the worst room for recording because it's so echoey. So, tell people, if you can, go into your bedroom. If you don't want to be on camera because your bedroom's a mess, feel free to have your camera off during the interview, but make sure that you're somewhere that has got a lot of soft furnishings, and the smaller the room, the more soft furnishings in that room, the better. If they can get in their wardrobe, feel free. That is a lot of podcasters start in their wardrobes, believe me. But it just helps you with the sound consistency, because it can be really, really jarring when you go from one voice that is quite, of studio quality. Obviously, I've got my mic, I set myself up in a particular area so that I'm surrounded by soft furnishings, and then your guest is sitting in a kitchen. It can just be jarring for the listener. And because they're listening and they're not seeing anything, it can be worse for it. So is it worth it? Is it worth it? It depends on you. It depends on your reason for doing it. If you want to reach the masses, if you want to get your knowledge out there and attract new people, then yeah, I think it is worth it. For me, it's worth it. I think it's going to be something that grows over time. You know, I haven't jumped out the gate and got, 50 million downloads in my first few months. It's a slow grower because of where I started, because I started from nothing at all. It turned out that lady that had got the 22 episodes and the £500 a month, she'd actually got an audience that she'd been building for 8 years. And then she dropped a new podcast. So, don't compare yourself to somebody else's step 22 when you're at step 1. So yeah, I'm going to be focusing on getting more guests in my industry on and sharing those. And I think it's going to be good. It's going to be good. I'm happy with where I am with my podcast, and I'm really excited about where it can go. What I would say is to end is to focus on being better than you have been, not better than the person next to you. And that is how we lift each other up. Which is really, really important. So yeah, if you've got any questions, I am happy to take them. I am also happy, if anybody wants me to do a video recording that I will share with you of me editing a podcast on Audacity, so you can see that, because I think that's where people get tripped up, is the technical side, and Audacity is actually quite easy to use. So if you want that, I am quite happy to do that. Thank you very much, ladies.